Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Recruit, Hire, Lead to Retain. I am your host, Deborah Reynolds, owner of About Face Image Consulting, leadership coach, image mindset, and transformation expert. And my co host is recruiting and hiring expert and owner of Best Culture Solutions, Tim Dick. Welcome, Tim.
Good morning. How are you today?
I am doing great. And for our audience today, you might have noticed we started 2 minutes late out of
Mm.
respect for Remembrance Day. And being that today is Remembrance Day, we are reminded about the sacrifices made around the world to attain peace and the sacrifices made to attain freedom and prosperity in all areas of life. So, our topic today is woven into that. It is about the attainment of peace, where people struggle to get over anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, or shame. And they struggle to get over the limiting beliefs and how that actually impacts selecting the right job and getting hired. So,
Right.
those limiting beliefs and the inability to shake the negative emotions and triggers lead us to make limiting decisions. And overall, the results are not good. So this
True.
is such a good topic, Tim, right? I was
Yeah.
really excited to talk about this today because from your perspective, you have a lot to share.
Mm,
Both do actually. So,
for
um,
sure.
what are you noticing in the workplace environment about those emotions of anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt?
Yeah.
How they show up?
Well, I can tell you, like, I just thought of this now as you're introducing it, Deb. But let's talk about how it's just shown up in the last couple of years. The biggest buzzword in the labor market in the last couple of years has been the buzz phrase, I should say, the Great Resignation. And how
Right.
much do you think of that has been driven by, bad lingering feelings or fear? A lot of it is well placed. I honestly think a lot of it is driven by poor behavior by some employers, which is also driven by fear and resentment and anger. But I think that it's a huge determining factor in the labor market. Many people make decisions in the labor market based on how they feel about a situation, and I think it's everywhere. Not a single decision is made in the labor market without that being a driving factor. I think in some ways, and whether or not it dominates how you make that decision or not is up to you. But it is something that our survival instinct kicks in on both sides of the table and is everywhere, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Recently I just shared with you, of course, I'm a certified positive intelligence coach. I'm also an NLP coach practitioner. And one of the modalities that I've been trained in and to deliver to my clients is the breakthrough and the timeline therapy model, which is based on and is the exact same modality used in the Warrior program in the UK, a program which was initially endorsed by Prince Charles, and is recognized globally around the world for people that suffer with PTSD and trauma. So what we essentially feel in the moment of we're annoyed or angry or we're sad or we're afraid, we we actually are triggered by an event that happens in the past. We are actually attaching those emotions to past and previous events that have taken place, and we bring them forward. And essentially what we're doing is we're creating a decision or an environment based on a decision which is negative, which essentially is an unresourceful decision. Because if you have unresourceful thought processes and beliefs, then you have unresourceful decisions. The results are going to be unresourceful. When you have resourceful thought processes that are based on resourceful emotions and resourceful beliefs, you then have resourceful decisions. And the ability to be resourceful, the ability to tap into our own inner resources and to explore the resources that are around us to make effective decisions and to collaborate with people and to move forward, it has to be based on elements that are positive rather than negative. So you have to be able to remove those negative emotions because they, in effect, can ruin an organization and ruin the culture of an organization very, very quickly. And then this is what happens. We end up with something like a great resignation, or people that are essentially shut off in the workplace environment. They're just kind of doing their job, but they're actually not giving their all with great joy and enthusiasm.
Isn't that the truth? And it happens on both sides. And I think too, like, The two biggest buzzwords lately in the recruiting space, or in the culture space, or the workplace space, we got the great resignation, and you have quiet quitting. Both of those things are phenomenon of all the same things, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And the other thing too that I notice a lot is that, now don't get me wrong, when it came to the great resignation, I think a lot of people had well placed their actions. I mean, there's a lot of people that weren't being treated well or with respect, and that's another angle of fear on the other side. And so people were doing the right thing. But what ends up happening, I think, sometimes too, though, is that a lot of people start making decisions, you know, based on running away from a bad situation as opposed to running to a good situation. And the old saying is that the grass isn't always greener on the other side of the fence. And that doesn't mean that you should challenge it, not challenge the grass to get greener where you are or to find a greener place. Don't get me wrong, a lot of people made those decisions for all the right reasons. It was time to make a change, or it was time to seek something better. But when you do that, if you let fear dominate your process, when you make that change, what ends up happening is that you deal with a hand of weakness, and you might make the wrong decision. So when I say that, I have to be clear. I don't question people's motivations, or whether or not they should be seeking something better or new or different. However, if you don't manage your process from a position of strength instead of fear, what you probably are going to end up doing is putting yourself in a situation where you're not actually looking for a better situation or greener grass. You're just running away because you're not happy, and you got to be really smart and careful about that. I totally agree with a lot of people who make decisions based on poor cultures or being treated poorly, stuff like that. They should make that decision. However, you got to make sure that you're doing it with the right mindset and not acting in fear to put yourself in the right position when you make that decision.
Yeah, those are really good points. It brings to mind the issue of values and what we really value and why we value certain things. The reasons behind something is important to us. And if you don't have the mindset straight, you are attaching the wrong reasons to why something is important
Yeah,
to you. And that spills over, those values define how we make decisions.
that's
And
right.
when you have a workplace environment and you're making decisions with a lack of integrity, a lack of
Mhm.
character, and the value systems are not in the right place, we're not coming from the right perspective, we run into a lot of problems. So listen, there are a lot of organizations out there. They do the values assessment, they do the vision and the mission, but I can tell you it's not done properly. It's not done well, and
That's
therefore
right.
they don't have a continuity happening within an organization where those values are fully embraced and acknowledged, and they're acted out. We see them in how people are thinking. We see it in
Mm.
how people are behaving and
Hmm.
interacting and collaborating with each other. And you made another really good point about, it could be the right decision to move on and leave in another organization. I agree 100%. And at the same time, I want to be able to say, are you leaving because things are difficult and because you're refusing to develop those skill sets inside of yourself to make yourself a stronger, better person, of the better version of you? Because you may
Right.
be missing out on really important lessons that will
Mm.
make you a stronger, better leader. Because you cannot shy away from all the negativity in life. It's
No.
actually there. The idea is go through the experience of whatever the negativity is and then pull out from a positive standpoint, what are the gifts and opportunities here? What are
Mm.
the lessons I need to learn? What are the learnings that I can take forward into my future to make all the positive decisions going forward? And if you don't come with that mindset, your decisions are going to be, they're just going to be very poor decisions that will not serve you going forward in the future.
Oh yeah, you're totally right. Yeah, and it happens on both sides of the table too. It's funny. I was chatting with somebody yesterday, um, that was having hiring problems, and they're like, "Yeah, we hire 6 people, expecting 3 of them to leave within the first week, and there's no point in us doing a proper interview process because we don't have time for that, and we just need to fill the spot now." And I was like, "Well, hold on a second. How much?" And talk about dealing from a position of fear, or right? They're afraid that they can't. I was like, so wouldn't you be better off covering the shift yourself, and actually interviewing people and getting the right one? and increasing your chance of getting the right one instead of spinning your wheels to have 50% turnover within a week all the time? Like, how much time are you losing on that process that you could use on interviewing people properly? And if you interviewed them properly and found the right one, and just covered the shifts yourself until you could do that, you'd probably be doing this process less. It would take a lot more work on the front end, don't get me wrong, but you're not constantly spinning your tires on the back end. So, what is it that you want to do every day, right? Do you want to be spending your time every day chasing that, or do you want to spend your time every day fixing the problem once and for all? So,
That's the key, is fixing the problem, like eliminating the problem, rather than having a band-aid effect where it continues on and it actually consumes the staff and the team and the leaders, where they can't get the job done properly. They can't have the contribution necessary to help the organization grow and scale in the right way.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, such a shame when those things happen, I tell you.
Yeah, and it's all about, I mean, and you know this too. At the end of the day, like it's survival instinct, right? That is making us do these things, but it's also misleading us. It's helping us make a really good decision in maybe 10 minutes in front of us, but after that, it's not really doing much of anything for any of us. And that's just there's survival instinct is not the worst thing, but you just got to understand and recognize what it is and use it to motivate you to take the right kind of action as opposed to just slapping something together, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. When you're thinking about talking to the person who's wanting to be recruited and wanting to be hired, when you're thinking about the employer who wants to hire and build the team and build the organization and have the organization grow and scale, we're really thinking about perhaps an extension of ourselves.
Yeah.
Perhaps maybe identifying which areas we're weak in and we need to fill spots where we're not great in these areas. So we want to leverage the gifts and talents of other people, and have them contribute, and be part of building the organization together. And, this can also be, this is a real problem in the planning stages of an organization. When you as a business owner, when you as a CEO and your leadership team are wanting to scale and you're wanting to scale quickly, sometimes it's done too quickly without really thinking what are the essential
That's right.
elements you need to put into place.
That's
And I
right.
know that there's organizations out there where they have a board, they have investors, and the investors are putting a lot of pressure on the CEO to make certain things happen. And yet they're not coming from the same values of what is perceived and what's really important in an organization to make it grow. So they just want their money, but they're not thinking about other sustainable elements of a business that are really going to have an impact on community.
Oh, totally. And the other thing too is that they're also not thinking about the fact that, yeah, I agree with you. Let's make some money, but you want to do that well, do it the right way, right? Because in the end, you're gonna do better, when it comes to these types of decisions with turnover, training, overtime costs, if you just take a breath and do it the right way. I'm not suggesting that you do these processes in a way that drags on unnecessarily long either. I don't believe when it comes to recruiting that anything more than 2 interviews should ever be required. That's too much. But at the same time, you've got others on the other end of the spectrum. People just make it happen. Just make it happen. It's costing us money and it's all. I agree. So let's do it right. Let's have a proper process the first time that identifies the right person. And that way we're not just rushing and scrambling to just make bad decisions, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Totally agree with that. Tim, I want to talk a little bit about the whole elements of responsibility and commitment. I mean, to really
Sure.
make things shift and to contribute well to an organization, to really show up as a leader in an organization, you need to take 100% responsibility,
Mm.
100% responsibility for yourself,
Yep.
how you manage yourself and your
Yep.
thinking and your emotions, and taking responsibility when you go into an organization for the role that you play and how you contribute, which means you got to be 100% committed to the process. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an all-in process. So where are you seeing, in the interview process and in the whole hiring process, maybe they're fully embracing the concept of 100% responsibility and commitment, or they're not so much embracing it?
On either side of the table?
Yeah, on either side of the table.
Yeah, you know what? the biggest thing that I noticed, and this is an easy one to go after, or I shouldn't say go after, because that's not the right way to look at it. But the biggest thing that I always notice is just you always hear the term ghosting candidates, and you see it all the time, like all the time. People are ghosting candidates, and it's not what I see when that happens is that it's not taking ownership for your role in respecting people and their time and responsibility for the recruitment process. And it's actually a very, very short-sighted thing to do. I don't think anybody ever really means to do it, but they do it. And I can tell you, if you want to take care of a hiring, recruitment, and retention problem, develop the mindset that you're just not going to do that, because it pays off on both sides of the recruitment and retention process. Um, I can tell you stories where, because I didn't ghost people as a recruiter, where they actually followed up with me afterwards and said, thank you for doing that, even though you didn't pick me for the job. And they recommended working with me to their friends. And I would have interviews with people, and I'd ask them, how'd you hear about the job? Well, you interviewed my friend and they didn't get the job, but they said that because you got back to them and you gave them the feedback and that you were on time and you kept your promises throughout the process, that I'd be dumb not to apply for a role with you. So it's like, wow, okay, that's awesome. You know, um, it does pay off in spades, because people talk and people get to know who you are, right, through all of that. So I think that's one area for sure where responsibility needs to be taken, and people can definitely improve there. There's a reason why it's a cliche, like this "don't ghosting" thing you hear about all the time. Uh, it's because everybody's doing it, and so and I mean, we spend so much time as business leaders trying to gather intel about how we can get an edge, and yet that one is just so obvious because everybody talks about it and nobody does anything about it. You want an easy edge and an easy one to find out. Nobody likes it. People talk about it in the recruiting process. I never heard back. It's such an easy one to action and an easy one to research and find out and get intelligence on, that people would be dumb not to just have that self-discipline. It pays off in the end.
Tim, that is why you and I are friends and we collaborate, because our alignment in terms of values and the responsibility, the
Mm,
ability to show great compassion towards people and to do the right thing is really important to both of us.
so true.
And
Yeah.
it shows up. It shows up with your clients giving you that feedback. It shows up in my clients giving me that feedback.
Mm,
And to me, I don't believe there's any other way of doing business. I mean, it's got to be done that way. And the ones that embrace that mindset of being fully present, fully responsible, fully committed, with intention, wanting to build the relationships with people, even on the other side of the table, is critically important. I mean, we are talking about people's lives here. In the moment that you and I are talking, Tim, there are, from a Remembrance Day point of view,
mm,
there are people fighting.
mhm.
There are
Yeah.
people in combat, but there are also people that are desperately afraid and they're nervous for their jobs. From a day-to-day basis, from an economy point of view, they're wondering if they're going to be able to buy presents for their kids
Mm,
at Christmas time. They're wondering if they're going to be able to make that next mortgage payment or that next rent payment. And we have a level of responsibility that when we are hiring people, that we do a great job within our own company, and that we're fully embracing the contributions of each and every employee. They see things from their point of view, their position in the company, that senior level managers and directors and CEOs and company owners don't see. They see that where there's problems, where there's unnecessary expenses, they see where there's complete waste, where things could be streamlined and put together. And believe me, there are a lot of people, a lot of employees out there that they're bringing these issues forward and they're being ignored. But
mm,
if they were just listened to, if
mhm.
people were paying more attention to what they are saying and the value that they're bringing to the organization, they want the company to succeed
That's
because they
right.
still want to receive a paycheck at the end of the
That's
day.
right.
They don't
Yeah.
want the company to go bust. So the fear that's within a day-to-day employee They're counting on the senior people, the senior managers, to do things in the right way, to run the company in the right way, put the right systems and processes, and make very responsible decisions.
Totally. Yeah. And it's funny, like, just you got me thinking about another, it's almost like a side note, but it's related to what we're talking about. I've always said, you talked about making money and the bottom line and watching for it. I've always said, if you want to find the best way to find money in your organization, ask the people who work there where the money can be found. A lot of leaders are very uncomfortable with that. They're afraid to give up that control because they think that, well, you're letting them run it, they're not going to come up with enough ideas. We need more than, they're not going to take it seriously. They won't find us enough savings, stuff like that. It's not true. You'll probably be pleasantly surprised with what people come up with, and they are going to probably exceed your expectations, and you'll almost be afraid that they can't achieve it sometimes. But if you let them run with it, the results that you get are going to be crazy.
I agree.
Yeah,
And that's the trust element, right? Where you have to surrender your own trust, and to some degree trusting these employees that they're investing in your company. They are
exactly.
there 8, 10, 12 hours a day. They're invested in your company. They're in, a lot of them are in there for the long haul. And part of that is can allow them the ability to contribute as a team member, not just an employee in a specific position, but an overall team member with great ideas and an ability to have insight into things that senior managers and companies owners don't have an
Yeah,
insight into.
totally. And let's talk about putting aside fear and things that go with that to create a great culture. I mean, this also extends to KPI development. I can remember um, there were situations where I had asked people to set our own KPI, key performance indicator goals, and other leaders would be afraid of that. At first, they would say, well, this isn't as important to them as it is to us. So they're not going to come up with goals that are going to achieve what we need to achieve, like, as in they won't stretch their goals far enough. And then as soon as they were done, it'd be like, oh my goodness, this is too much. They can't make this. Like, we can't let them do this. They've set a goal that's, in other words, they were pleasantly blown away by the goal that they set to the point where they didn't think it was attainable and they thought everybody was crazy. And it's like, no, just let people do it. Put your fear aside, right? And what you've created is a culture of ownership where people feel like they have taken ownership for whatever goals that you set for your organization, or that they have ownership for it, and they will always exceed your expectations if you just let them. Yeah,
I agree.
always.
100% I agree on that. And what we're typically finding too is that a lot of employees are much harder. The individual is much harder on themselves than other people think.
Yeah,
They have that internal dialogue, which can be driven from negativity. At the same time, it could be, that inner sort of push rather than being led with more joy and excitement in the process. But
yeah,
you can still leverage it. And
that's right.
certainly if they're willing to shift their mindset to really leverage the creativity, the innovation, the productivity, the, learning to navigate in very effective ways, if we can leverage that mindset, people can contribute so much more. I mean, it
That's
does
right.
remind me of when I worked as a consultant with Pepsi Cola.
Mm,
The finance department could not think of solving a particular problem that was, a seven-figure problem. So when we worked on mindset, when we worked on having the team collaborate in a very different way and put them through very specific exercises, it was a 15-minute process, but they were able to come up with a solution to solve the problem,
right.
when previously for a couple of years they were not able to solve the problem. So a lot of it is giving people permission and allowing them to be the best version of who they are, and not jamming the brakes on and saying, oh, you can't over exceed what the standard in the group is. So we often see that in government too, where in government agencies there's a standard of performance, but if somebody really excels, they're like, you're doing
Yeah,
too much and you're outperforming, just slow it down a little bit.
yeah. What's the issue here? Yeah, yeah. Exactly. You're right, and it's fear on all sides of things, isn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
it's and fear. Like, yeah, it's just crazy. Fear just it really it really dominates a lot of things that people do, and again, it can be a really healthy thing use as a motivator or to use as a to do the right thing with it. But if you allow it to dominate and you do the wrong thing with it, then it can actually be very crippling and limiting in what it allows people to do around you, much
What
less
do
yourself.
Tim, what are you seeing in the recruiting process right now, where the hires want to come in and get your support and guidance, where they're driven with fear? What's actually happening? What are you noticing with their mindset when they're driven predominantly by fear?
Yeah, a lot of times they take the first job that they can, or they panic and they just start spraying their resume all over the place instead of having some some deliberation to it. And don't get me wrong, there are times where you may need to do that. I mean, it all depends on what your financial runway looks like, and I wouldn't recommend that people just be patient to the point where they put themselves homeless either. But you should always be um, you don't want to be too patient on the other side where you're waiting for something that doesn't exist. Like, there's no perfect job. I can tell you that I worked at Disney and not every day there was perfect. It wasn't magical because it was a perfect place. It was because people put hard work in. But I mean, was it probably the best culture I've worked in? Probably. Easily it was, because there were bad days and good days, but there was more good than bad in the ways that it came together. Um, but basically, I would always tell people to be deliberate, right? Identify the types of roles that are going to give you energy, identify the types of workplaces that are going to align with your values and aim for them. Take the time to tailor your job search and your resume for what you really want, as much as financially possible. And if and when you do come across that good situation, you know what, take the time to assess it properly. Don't expect for or wait for perfection, but if you can get 80-20 good versus bad, or things that give you energy versus things that don't, and it's in the right place that you've targeted, then you got to think hard about going after that. And I would challenge people just to take the time to get it right, because you only get to do your career once. If you have to go ahead and take the wrong opportunity, or not the one that you really wanted, just because of financial considerations, then fine, take it, but then don't give up. That'll help keep you going and give you fuel to extend your search, and you can extend your search while you're doing that. But that's what I see, and that's what I would encourage people to guard against, or to be proactive against.
Yeah, those are really great insights, Tim. And when people are actually taking that job and then not giving up at the process of getting their ideal position, it's really taking the learnings and
Hmm.
taking the experience of what they get while they're in that temporary position,
Yeah.
and seeing like what are the skill sets that I could learn and really leverage here. What can I turn into in terms of a gift and opportunity,
Yeah.
so that I can be an even better performer, contribute in a more solid, responsible way into an ideal position when that particularly arises. What I love about what you and I do, Tim, is that you handle the recruiting hiring process, and you're working on that specific element with the hire and also with the recruiter. And what I do as a leadership coach and helping people with mental fitness is helping them to show up as their very best self from a mental standpoint,
Mm.
from having that positive mindset and that inner confidence, so that they really know what they're able to contribute to an organization, and knowing what they're looking for, so that they are 100% responsible and 100% committed. So listen, I think we're at the end of our session
We
today.
are.
I want to say thank you to Vancouver Media Marketing for organizing this LinkedIn Live event. And to our audience, thank you for joining us on Recruit, Hire, Lead to Retain. And to those brave men and women who have
Mm.
served abroad and at home to give us peace, we remember
Yeah.
you. We thank you. Audience members, please hold your loved ones dear to your heart and have a great day.
See ya.